Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, just when you think we're done, we pull you back in. Battlefields of Mana Social Media Showdown isn't over yet. We have Raymond P representing the Lunar Knights going up against Tony A representing the Regal Guard. This is YouTube versus Facebook part technically 5, even though this is the 6th one of these matchups because we had one that was YouTube versus YouTube. But anyway, here's Raymond's army. Raymond went with 2 mounted archers, a unit of swords, light cavalry, spearmen, and archers. So that's going to be very interesting. We have 6 units there. Now, Tony went with 2 units of crossbows, 2 units of spearmen, and 1 unit of heavy cavalry. 5 units to 6, a fairly close matchup in terms of how many units per side. This one may be very interesting, folks. We'll be back at the end of deployment. All right, folks, we are back after deployment. Raymond won the roll-off to pick a side, deploy first, and go first, which was probably a good thing. Raymond has more units than Tony, so at least Tony was able to deploy in reaction to the way Raymond deployed. Now, Raymond started off by sticking a unit of a unit of archers right there, thinking he's going to run up into the woods and keep them there so they'll be safe. Well, not, entirely safe, but they'll at least get a cover bonus against any ranged attacks from Tony's side in those woods. Now, Tony, on the other hand, decided to deploy heavy cavalry here. Gonna just march straight up. That heavy cav isn't afraid of any archers. Flanked by some crossbows to provide range support on either side of that dwelling, depending on which way Raymond decides to move up. Spearmen over there, because look at all that cav on the side. Spearmen on this side. There's cav over there and a unit of swordsmen, and they have some range support as well. So very balanced over here. And spearmen in the center for Raymond, that was in direct opposition of the heavy cav being over there. But this is what deployment looks like, and we will be back at the end of round 1. All right, folks, we are back at the end of round 1. Just look at how gorgeous a table full of models is. I mean, come on. Anyway, so let's focus here. Raymond went first, darted up with the mounted archers no further than they needed to in order to take shots at the spearmen who were back here in their deployment zone. So they shot and only did a single wound, so that's not too bad. Swords moved up as far as they could. Archers moved up as far as they could. Now that they're in the woods, they feel fairly safe against shots potentially from these crossbowmen, but being there, they're too far away to hit anything. Spears moved up as far as they could. Identically over here, mounted archers moved up and took shots at those spears, also doing a single wound. Light cav moved up right to there. They had to shuffle over a bit so that they could squeeze themselves up through here thanks to that dwelling. Spearmen moved up as far as they could to here, and they like this position because what's going to happen is either those mounted archers, because movement happens first. So if Raymond wants to get shots with those mounted archers, he can, but that means the light cavalry will not be able to charge in. So he has to choose. Does he want the archers to take shots, or does he want the light cavalry to get in there in close combat against those spears? But either way, let's say he doesn't move either of those units and just takes the shots. The spears are now in position to charge the mounted archers. So this narrow gap up here, these 2 thick units of cavalry, he may have to redirect the light cavalry over. But anyway, so the rest of Tony's line looks like this. Spears moved up to here. Crossbows moved up to here. Nothing within firing range as of right now. He moved the crossbows so that they would be just out of the range of those archers. So if those archers want to take shots at these crossbows, they're going to have to move up again, which will give them a move and shoot penalty. And also, I believe these spears are just out as well of those archers. So good placement of troops. Heavy cav moved right up to here. Now, there were a couple reasons for that. Number one, they are now not within firing distance yet of those archers. So basically, all the movement on Tony's side was ensuring that, units were protected against archers. If Raymond wants to take shots, he's going to have to move them, and then they're going to suffer a move to shoot penalty. But they are moved up far enough now where they will, if those spearmen don't fall back, or if, obviously they're probably going to move up, but even if they stayed put, those heavy cav can now not charge in, but move in and get collision hits. Not only that, but the spears are just out. Even if they move twice their movement speed, they would just barely not be able to get there. And the whole reason Tony did that is because he wants the heavy cav to get their collision hits. As soon as heavy cav comes into contact with an opponent, they get D6 collision hits on the target. And but of course, if the opponent moves into contact with you first, you don't get those collision hits. Now, either way, spears, because they have polearm, are going to go first in that melee. But it'll be nice at least to have some of those collision hits. Also, now these crossbows are just one movement away from being able to take fire. And I believe, just the spearmen, it looks like. So they'll, if they want to get shots in at the spearmen, they can do that. And those spears, as we already discussed, have moved up, and that kind of creates a problem for Raymond over there. But this is how everything looks at the end of round one. Now we're going to dissect it turn by turn. So we'll be back at the end of Raymond's turn 2. All right, folks, this is the end of turn 2 for Raymond. So, from Raymond's vantage point, what did he accomplish? All right, well, these swordsmen moved up at double speed, hence the double move token. So no combat here this turn. But that's okay, because now he is in contact with the spearmen. So again, with spearmen having polearm, they always go first in the first round of close combat, so it didn't matter if the swordsmen charged in to get an initiative bonus or anything like that. The spears were always going first, so Raymond is just happy to now be in contact. These mounted archers shuffled straight over. They are now in the woods. All that it takes to get a cover save in the woods is for the banner bearer of the unit to be within the confines of the woods. And the template of the woods kind of goes like this. So the banner bearer is just in the woods. The mounted archers took shots at these crossbowmen, doing a single wound due to their move to fire penalty. These archers did shuffle forward, so they also had to move to fire penalty, and they took aim at these heavy cavalry, doing a single wound. The spearmen stayed right where they are. They said, "You want to come at us? Come at us." This whole situation, Raymond's being a little cheeky over here. These light cavalry backed up and reformed facing this direction, and the mounted archers moved back and took shots, doing 2 wounds, so that killed off a spearman. But the whole point of moving exactly there is they are just outside of 8 inches. So even at moving double speed, the spears would still not quite be able to get over there. If they want to, they can redirect over here, but unfortunately for them, if they do come over here, that leaves their flank open to shots from those mounted archers. That's kind of what the spearmen are thinking here. The heavy cav wants to come up to the spears. Well, these mounted archers in the woods could reform and shoot into the flank of the heavy cav here. It's all about positioning, and Raymond definitely seems to have that in mind. We're going to have to see how Tony responds at the end of Tony's turn 2. All right, folks, Tony's turn 2 has come to an end, thus the end of round 2. Spearmen and swordsmen trading blows, 2 wounds apiece. That's a swordsman dead, a spearman dead. Crossbowmen moved up to here and took shots at the mounted archers in the woods, unfortunately not doing any wounds. Of course, then again, they did have a move and shoot penalty. They moved there, Because now, if these mounted archers want to reform and hit the heavy cav in the flank, they will be exposing their own flank to these crossbows, and that's something they definitely want to think about before doing. With that said, the heavy cav decided to do a double move, so no combat this turn, into the spears, and collision hits. Unfortunately, I only rolled a 2, so only 2 collision hits, 1 ended up wounding. These spears, Tony didn't like with the game they were playing over here. It was kind of this bait and switch. They were just going to keep backing up. It just was not fun. So he reformed and moved the spears over here. He's thinking maybe they can come over into this area and maybe help out over here. Whereas these crossbows, now you want to come down and play with our spearmen. Well, you're going to get a face full of crossbows if you decide to do that. So we'll see what these folks end up having to say about all that. And that is the way things are looking right now. So we will be back at the end of Raymond's turn 3. All right, folks, the end of Raymond's turn 3, things have definitely gotten a little bloodier. Okay, so mounted archers and foot archers both condensed their shots into this unit of crossbows, killing 1. This unit of mounted archers moved up just slightly so that these crossbows would be in range, took shots, and did a single wound. Those light cav are sitting there. Why? Well, because they had enough movement if they wanted to charge the crossbows. These spearmen could have then reformed and moved into the flank of the light cavalry. So they didn't want to do that. What I think they're thinking is these crossbows are going to have to move up if they want to get those mounted archers or even these light cavalry within range. And doing that will push them just beyond the point where these spearmen wouldn't have enough room to move over into their flank. So they just stayed put for now. Spearmen attacked the heavy cavalry, doing 2 wounds, killing off 1 heavy cav. Heavy cav in return took out 2 spearmen. Now, over down here, swordsman attacked first. Swordsman won the initiative roll-off, but did not do any wounds. Spears had a fantastic attack roll. They were so close to doing 4 wounds, but the swordsman's parry save, they only save on 6s, so I rolled 4 dice. 3 of the 4 were 6s. That was absolutely insane. So the spears did a single wound, so it's all tied up down there. The score is still 0-0 heading into Tony's turn 3. All right, folks, the end of Tony's turn 3, thus the end of round 3, which means the game is half over. Let's recap. Let's talk about some bad news first. Simultaneous combat down here between the swords and the spears. The spearmen were able to do... I rolled so pathetically. They still had 2 spearmen in the back rank, so that was 8 dice. I only rolled 3 hits, and so it was 5 1s and 2s. I only needed 3s or better. Out of 8 dice, I rolled 5 1s and 2s. And then the 3 hits were all 3s. So swordsmen got their defense roll, blocked 2 of it. There was only 1 left. They got a parry save on a 6. That failed, thankfully. So the spears did 1 wound, killing off another swordsman. Swordsman, on the other hand, had a fantastic attack roll. They only got 6 dice. I think maybe all of them hit, and then, no, I think 5 of the 6 hit, and then the spears, they don't have any special defensive abilities, so they just rolled straight up defense dice. They only rolled 1 save on 5 dice, so they took 3 wounds, and so that's why that back rank looks the way it does. Crossbows took shots at the mounted archers, doing a single wound. I thought about moving them back because I don't like that they are getting shot at by 2 units without any cover or anything. But, if I move them back, they have a move to shoot penalty. And as far as I could move them back, still being able to shoot, I was still within both of these ranges. So I figured I might as well stay put, get the full advantage of the attack. Unfortunately, we were only able to do 1 wound. The spearmen actually won initiative and went first. and managed to do a wound and kill off another heavy cav. Now, the heavy cavalry in return, I don't even remember how many wounds that was, like another 4 wounds or something like that. So that spearman unit's getting absolutely decimated right before our very eyes. And that is the first victory point of the game. Actually, no, well, technically it was. At the time, it was the first victory point for cutting that spearman unit in half. Raymond then countered by cutting this spearman unit in half. So it's a point apiece right now. It's all tied up at 1-1. And then up here, these crossbows actually figured out they could move up to right there. There's still enough space for 1 unit. So if these light cav wanted to, if these light cav wanted to move in here, these spears could reform and still get into the flank by 1 figure into those light cavalry. As is, though, so the crossbow moved up that far, took shots, and killed off a light cav. So Raymond's not going to be too fond of that. We'll have to see what ends up happening. But this is the way things look at the halfway point of the game. We'll be back after Raymond's turn 4. Okay, folks, Raymond's turn 4 started out pretty good. It was actually simultaneous, even though at the time the swordsman had someone in the back rank, the spearmen didn't, so they were cut in half, which means they were panicked, penalty to their initiative. The roll-off made it simultaneous either way, so the spears still got full attacks. Against the swords, ended up doing 2 wounds, killing off the guy in the back. That swordsman unit is now cut in half. Victory point for Tony. Unfortunately, the swords did 4 hits, and I was only able to block 1 of them. So 3 wounds on those spearmen, unfortunately. So this was actually pretty interesting. The mounted archers took shots at the crossbowmen, I think doing 2 wounds. And those archers took shots at the crossbows as well, doing no wounds. So that unit has not been cut in half yet. Braced themselves with the spears. They actually thought about attempting to break away so that maybe the light cav that was here could reform and attack them. But they thought, the heavy cav would just eat the light cav for lunch. So maybe just keep them there as long as we can. And so instead, the light cav, who doesn't want to play this game anymore, turned, ran, reformed, and now could potentially come over here, maybe come into the flank of the heavy cav over there. They have some options. These mounted archers took shots at those crossbowmen. I think just doing a single wound, if I remember right. So that just killed off 1 of those crossbows, but that was it, essentially, for Raymond's turn 4. We'll be back at the end of Tony's turn 4. All right, folks, this is one hell of a battle. So round 4 is over. Let's just look at the glaringly obvious. There is no longer a unit of spearmen there. These heavy cavalry won initiative, and even with the spearmen braced, the heavy cav just mauled them over. So the spearmen didn't even get attacks back. That spearman unit has been eliminated. These crossbows moved up, and even with the move to fire penalty, still picked off 1 of those mounted archers. These spears moved up because they're no longer needed there. So they figure they might as well come over here just in case the light cav thought about swinging around and getting into the flank. Now these spears could swoop in and make that an option that they'd think twice about. These crossbows fired into those mounted archers, killing 1. And then the spearmen down here, since things kind of looking a little bit south, they decided to brace themselves. But overall, a fantastic turn 4 for Tony. Let's see how Raymond responds in Raymond's turn 5. All right, folks, this is Raymond's turn 5 concluded. Down here, the swords did a wound to the spears, so the spearmen are whittled down to a banner bearer. Swords did take a wound from that banner bearer in retaliation. Now it was mounted archers on these crossbows doing a wound, killing off that crossbowman in the back there. These archers reformed and shot at the heavy cav, doing a wound. Those mounted archers moved over here. Now the reason for that, it looks a little dangerous, but these crossbowmen it's always center of banner bearer to the center of the banner bearer. Now this dwelling is blocking that line of sight. Are they going to be able to get up? They only have 4 inches of movement to move up and wheel in order to hit. I don't think they can do that. So we're taking a bit of a chance here, but they wanted to get into the flank of the heavy cav. They did it. They did another wound, which now cut that unit in half. So they're hoping these crossbowmen don't find a way to get into their rear, but, they won't be able to move more than 4 inches, including wheels, and still fire. So they're hoping that by the time the crossbows do get up here and wheel and everything, it took both of their movement actions, and then on their next turn, they can get the heck out of dodge. Also, these light cav swung up here. The reason they're there is because they are now, I don't know where my 5, here it is. Heavy cav can only move 5 inches and still consider it a charge. So being here means that on Tony's turn, when he moves them in, it'll take both of their movement actions to get into contact. And at that point, yes, they will take collision hits, but they will not have to suffer a close combat, especially with them getting an initiative bonus for charging. And then all hell can break loose on Raymond's final turn, wheeling the archers, shooting into their flank, maybe shooting into their flank with those archers as well, and getting a close combat off. I don't know. We'll see how Tony responds, but that was pretty much it. So just to recap, trading a wound apiece down here, doing a wound there, a wound from the archers there, a wound from those archers there, and positioned up here. That's where we are. So what's the score right now? Well, Raymond has scored 3 points. 1, 2, 3. And Tony has scored 3 points as well. 1, 2, 3. So it's all tied up. Moving into Tony's turn 5. We'll be back at the end of round 5. All right, folks. The end of round 5. The end of Tony's turn 5. Braced with this spearman. So Raymond only has 1 turn left. He needs to do 2 wounds on a braced spearman to claim that extra point. Over here, crossbows shot into these mounted archers, doing a wound, killing off another mounted archer. They are 1 mounted archer away from being cut in half. That'll be a victory point for Tony. These spears moved up and over. They have a couple options here of where they want to go. These mounted archers got to be careful because these spears could easily get into their flank there. Or, depending on what these archers do, if they swing around to try to shoot at those heavy cav, spears could go into their flank or rear. These crossbows actually were able to move up in position just enough so that they could shoot into the rear of those mounted archers, doing 2 wounds, killing off a mounted archer. Here is where I just honestly don't know if I'm making a mistake or not. Now, the reason I was so bold about this, diving so far into the enemy lines, is because these heavy cav, they've already been cut in half. The only more points to squeeze out of them now is if somehow in the last turn Raymond can do 6 wounds and eliminate this unit. With the defense that the heavy cav has, I don't think he can do it, but he may. I'm not, anything's possible, but we did. We double moved. We got into contact. I rolled 4 collision hits and not a single one of them wounded. I only needed 3s or better. I rolled 4 1s and 2s. That was really sad because in order to cut this unit in half, which is the goal, we need to do 4 wounds now. Next turn in melee, Raymond, depending on how his shooting against them goes, if it doesn't look like he's going to be able to kill this unit, he's probably going to brace, which is going to make doing those 4 wounds even harder. But we'll see how that goes because, folks, it is the final round of the game. This is pretty nuts. I don't think the score's changed any. I still think it's 3-3 right now. Going into the final round, that's insane. We are now moving into round 6. All right, folks, good news and bad news. Raymond's final turn of the game, turn 6. You can see all of these move to fire tokens. This was insane. Raymond gambled on the fact that he didn't think he could do 6 wounds to that unit of heavy cavalry. So he focused all 3 of these ranged units on these spears. We started with this one. So we moved these mounted archers up and over. I now am pretty sure these crossbowmen can't get over here to swing a shot. So we think they're safe. But, so they moved to fire. These archers' position, they got to move to fire penalty. These mounted archers backed up so that these spears can no longer get to them. And, because that's, even though that doesn't look like a whole lot of space, spearmen are only movement 4, and once they get in the woods, they only have 2 inches. The movement would be cut in half, so they are not able to get there. Either way, started here. Shot in the rear, but that was negated by the move to fire penalty, so they were just straight up dice. A single wound. These archers, or was it these archers? I can't remember. One of these 2 also shot. A single wound. We're down to 1 spearman in the back rank with a wound on him. 1 more wound, and this unit is cut in half, and that'll be a point for Raymond. The final unit takes its shots and misses. Unbelievable. The spearmen that could, out in the middle of all this fire, they just saved a point and perhaps the game. Because over here, the swords and the spears. The swordsman, or the spearman, was able to strike first. He killed off 1 swordsman. That's a big deal because they went from 6 attack dice down to 4. 4 attack dice. The spearman braced himself. All 4 attack dice hit. So the spearman got 4 defense dice and a brace die. And I rolled 4 1s and 2s. That was one of the worst defense rolls I've ever rolled. I only blocked 1 of the hits. The spearman took 3 wounds and was killed. And so they reform and they're done. These light cavalry have just braced themselves because obviously they don't want to risk. They know they can't do 6 wounds alone to these guys, and they don't want to risk the heavy cavalry doing some wounds to them, and then next turn also doing more wounds to them and killing off those 2 in the back rank. Because right now, with that spearman dead, Raymond leads 4-3. Somehow, Tony needs to find a point in order to tie it, or 2 points to win it. What are his options? Well, there's not a whole lot of options. We either need to kill off this mounted archer here, that would be a point. Kill off that mounted archer there, that would be a point. Or take those 2 light cavalry out, that would be a point. I don't know if he's going to be able to do any of those things, to be honest, because we only have 3 crossbowmen there. They're still in the woods, technically. They're going to get a dodge roll. I'll have to measure. I haven't even measured. Maybe they can wheel and shoot over there. They'll have a move to shoot penalty, but at least they won't have a dodge defense roll, because we need to kill 1 of these 2 mounted archers and eliminate this whole back rank in order to win. We need to kill 1 of these 2 mounted archers just to tie it up. So, I mean, this is coming down to the wire. The final turn of the game, Tony's turn 6, and we'll be back. All right, folks, this is the end of the game, end of round 6, end of Tony's turn 6. So what happened? These crossbows fired into those mounted archers, only doing a wound. That mounted archer survived. These crossbows were able to wheel to this side of the building, shuffle over just slightly so they had line of sight to the banner bearer. Move to fire penalty, but that was kind of washed because of the bonus they got for shooting in the rear. They were able to do 2 wounds, or 3 wounds, actually, I think. 3 wounds, killing 1 of the mounted archers and doing a wound to the unit itself. So that is a point. And then over here, the heavy cavalry actually tried to break away. Why? They weren't confident they could do 4 wounds to a braced unit of light cavalry. So they wanted to break away to get a free reform and charge into the flank of these mounted archers. First, they'd get collision hits, and if that didn't do the trick, then in close combat, they could just obliterate that unit potentially. Unfortunately, they failed to break away. They are panicked since they are cut in half, and so that went from a +3 initiative bonus down to a +2. And of course, the light cavalry are a 4. So it was 4-2, and the light cav won the roll off. And then in close combat, light cav went first, didn't do a single wound. Heavy cavalry attacked back, had a pretty decent attack roll, but the brace die and the parry save cut down on how many wounds they took. They only ended up taking a single wound. So right now, folks, it is all tied up. Now, in Battlefields of Mana, the result at the end of turn 6 can end in a tie. So let's just make sure it really is a tie. So we have, for Tony, he eliminated half a unit of mounted archers, half a unit of swordsmen, and 1 complete unit of spearmen. So that is 4 total points. Whereas Raymond was able to cut a unit of heavy cavalry in half, cut a unit of crossbowmen in half, and eliminated an entire unit of spearmen, so that is also 4 points. What would a hypothetical turn 7 look like? Well, this unit of mounted archers would just flee to save this last point over here. These 2 units of ranged attacks would probably pick off that last spearman for a point. So then that would put Raymond up 5-4. So how could Tony score another point with these guys gone? He'd have to cut that unit in half. That's not going to happen. He'd have to eliminate both of these. That's not going to happen. He'd have to do 5 wounds to that unit. That's not going to happen. He'd have to do 3 wounds to this unit of light cavalry. Now, what would more than likely happen is, because it would be Raymond's turn next, Raymond would try to break away. It'd still be a 4-2. If he broke away, he would run these light calves somewhere where the shorter range of the crossbows couldn't get to him, maybe behind the woods, so that if they did get to him, they'd still get a cover save, maybe somewhere like over here, so that these heavy cavalry couldn't even get to them. And if they did, it would take both of their movement actions and they couldn't engage in an attack anyway. So doing 3 wounds, basically it would be Raymond's game to lose because it's his turn next. He would get the victory point for cutting them in half. And then the only 2 chances that Tony would have to get a point, to even tie it up, let alone win, would be to these 2 units. It'd just be impossible because Raymond would ensure that they would hide or flee or something, so that it just wouldn't happen. And we'd be all tied up again anyway if Tony was somehow able to score another point. So it would just keep going on in perpetuity. So that's where we're going to leave it, folks. This is insane. I'd honestly, out of all of the, 30, 40, 50 games of Battlefields of Mana I've played, I'm not sure that it's ever ended in a tie. And of course, at the end of the 6th round anyway, people leave their units in positions like it would be the end of the game. So Tony left these spearmen out here, didn't even move them on his turn, thinking that, this was the last turn. If Tony thought that there would be a tiebreaker turn, he probably would have ran them away. So yeah, it's just a situation where both parties involved believed the 6th round was the final round, so it just wouldn't be fair to go into a 7th anyway. But that's nuts. This was one for the books. I can't believe it. And that is it, folks. Let's first, before we go, I know this video is long enough, let's talk MVPs, LVPs. So God, if that spearman would have survived that final attack, Tony would have won, because that point went to Raymond. But of course, it's a game of what ifs, right? What if those crossbowmen couldn't quite get the angle on these mounted archers and couldn't take out that last one? Similar situation. But the heavy cab, they just ran over those spearmen. But again, they're a 5-point unit, so that they only eliminated a 2-point unit of spearmen. But points were hard to come by in this game in general. Raymond had all of these ranged units And Raymond's army was super fast. I mean, he has these mounted archers and these light cavalry, which were baiting units into combat. And he, of course, he won the deployment roll, so he got the advantage of having units in the forest. They were getting re-rolls to their defense dice all game long. Oh, that other unit of spearmen, where even were they? Oh, that was right. That was here. So these swords and spears just traded blows. That's where most of the wounds came from, was there. And the heavy cavalry eliminating that unit of spearmen. Otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot of damage taken. I mean, that's still nearly a full unit of light cavalry, a full unit of crossbows, or archers, a full unit of crossbows over there. This unit still not cut in half yet. Those spears not cut in half yet. We have a couple range units apiece that have been cut in half. But I mean, it was a super balanced force, even though there was only one crossover. Each army had a unit, at least, of spearmen. Tony had 2, Raymond had 1, but that was the only same unit. Because Tony went with crossbows, Raymond went with mounted archers and foot archers, and Tony went with heavy cav, Raymond went with light cav, and a unit of swordsmen. So, I mean, they were 2 almost completely different armies, and yet we ended up just like this. All right, folks, that's where we'll leave it. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it, and until next time.